John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured all to save. But though he sleeps, his life was lost while struggling for the slave. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory,
Welcome to War of the Rebellion, Stories of the Civil War. I'm your host, Leon, and this is a reading of the regimental history under the Maltese Cross, Antietam to Appomattox, the Loyal Uprising in western Pennsylvania, 1861 to 1865, Campaign's 155th Pennsylvania Regiment, narrated by the rank and file. And this is Part 2 of Reunions and Dedications. Rededication of Pennsylvania State Monument to 155th Regiment on Little Round Top, Gettysburg, September 17th, 1889. After the regiment had, from its private subscriptions, erected and dedicated its monument on Little Round Top, on September 17, 1886, the state of Pennsylvania, at the following session of the legislature, appropriated the sum of $1,500 for monuments on the positions occupied by Pennsylvania regiments during the 3 days' battle at Gettysburg. The 155th determined to apply its appropriation to the erection on its existing monument a life-sized figure in marble of a private soldier in the zouave uniform of the regiment. The soldier being duly armed and equipped and facing the famous peach orchard. Side by side, in the most commanding position at the summit of Little Round Top, it stands close to the picturesque monument of the heroic leader, General Warren, who, in the battle, directed the regiment to its position. A close observation of the regimental statue discloses the rare skill of the artist in reproducing the figure and features of the model whom the Committee on Designs selected to pose for the same. It will be easily recognized as Samuel W. Hill, who served in the ranks of Company F in that memorable 3 days fight. The state of Pennsylvania, in addition to the appropriation for the monuments, invited all survivors of the regiment participating in the battle to attend the dedicatory exercises and generously furnished free transportation from all parts of the state and return to such veterans. The orator for the unveiling of the state monument, chosen by the regiment, was Comrade John H. Kerr of Company I. His masterly and scholarly address entire has been deemed worthy of publication by the state in its volume on Pennsylvania at Gettysburg, and is here reproduced as worthy of the perusal of all readers of this history. Address of Sergeant John H. Kerr. Comrades of the 155th, we have met today, on this historic battlefield, to dedicate a monument erected here on this crest of Little Round Top, to mark the position held by the regiment on the eventful days when the fate of the nation hung suspended on the issue of the battle, and the Republic was saved only by the patriotic devotion, splendid courage, and sublime heroism of her citizen soldiers. We raised this memorial stone not to serve a mere selfish purpose, nor yet to perpetuate our own glory. Whatever record was made by the organization which we represent on this, the great battlefield of the war, is already unalterably fixed in history, beyond the power of mortal man either to enhance or dim. And yet, as we stand here on this consecrated ground with our memories full of the grand events of the past, with our hearts stirred again by, quote, the fierce joy the rapture of the strife, unquote. What wonder is it if we feel a pardonable pride in the thought that the humble part we bore in the conflict has indissolubly wedded us to immortal history, written here on these granite hills of Gettysburg, in letters of fire, with pens of steel, by the gallant men of the 18 loyal states, who met the enemy in the shock of battle here, in the supreme hour of the nation's peril. Henry V fired the hearts of his soldiers at Agincourt by thus addressing them, quote, "He today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile this day, shall gentle his condition," unquote. So we feel that all who fought on this historic field are lifted by the very greatness of the occasion to an equality of glory and are made brothers in fame. How striking the contrast which this peaceful landscape presents to the terrible scene in the bloody drama of war enacted here 26 years ago. Yonder heights are no longer crowned with hostile cannon. These valleys below us no longer reverberate with the roar of the conflict. No longer are the groans of the dying mingled with the shouts of victory. Everything around us betokens peace, where before was heard the rumble and grumble and roar of war. Time has wrought other changes. The survivors here assembled are but a small remnant of that noble battalion that stood here in line of battle with the 5th Corps, and assisted in repelling the terrible assaults of Hood and Longstreet. When column after column was hurled against our invincible front in the vain attempt to carry this rocky eminence. Some sleep here, in our national cemetery, like the heroes of Marathon, honored with burial on the field where they fell. Many, oh how many, went down in the blinding smoke of those terrible battles, fought by our armies under the immortal Grant from the Wilderness to Appomattox. Others have silently dropped one by one from our ranks since the close of the war, and have been added to the lengthening roll of the dead. In the providence of God, a goodly number have been permitted to come here today to take part in this, perhaps, the last public act of the regiment on earth. What place so appropriate to furl its torn and blood-stained battle flags as here, where the Southern Confederacy received its death blow, and thence staggered backwards to its grave? Here on this, the only battlefield of northern soil, where from the graves of our canonized dead rises perpetually the rich incense of patriotism and valor. What time so fitting as this, at once the anniversary of our natal day, and of the battle that turned the tide of war, and gave, quote, a new birth to freedom, unquote. On the 3rd of September, 1862, we bade adieu to friends and kindred and our native city, and embarked for the seat of war, encouraged by the presence of the loyal ladies of Pittsburgh, who passed their days in cheering brave men on their way to battle, their nights in praying for the preservation of their dear ones, and their dearer country. At Harrisburg, a regimental organization was effected with Edward J. Allen as colonel, and armed with the Belgian rifle, a species of heavy artillery, we were at once transported by rail to Washington. Here we were assigned to Colonel Auerbach's brigade, Humphrey's division. The foe had crossed the Potomac and had invaded loyal soil. We moved out to join the army that was gathering to meet him. We did not halt until we reached the bloody field of Antietam, near the close of the battle. Joining the corps of General Fitzjohn Porter, we were at once moved into line and lay for some hours under the enemy's fire. During the night, Lee retreated across the Potomac, and our army was too much shattered to follow him. 4 weeks after the battle, we remained in camp near Sharpsburg, without tents or shelter to protect us from the scorching sun or the pitiless rain. Many were they who died from exposure, and looked upon the stars for the last time. But at length, the bugle sounded forward, and we crossed the Potomac at Harper's Ferry and marched into Virginia, halting a few days at Warrenton, where General McClellan was relieved, and General Burnside assumed command of the army. We turn suddenly to the left and arrive in front of Fredericksburg in midwinter, and prepare for the coming sanguinary conflict, which proved, alas, the accaldama of the whole war. On December 13th, 1862, about 3 p.m., Humphreys' division crossed the Rappahannock on the pontoon bridge, under a furious cannonade from the enemy's mounted guns. And passing through the city and beyond, they divest themselves of their knapsacks and haversacks, and form line of battle in a ravine south of the canal. They move forward over the crest and through the line of Hancock's division under a fierce artillery and musketry fire. Here Colonel Alabac's brigade, to which the 155th was attached, was ordered to charge. With a cheer at double quick, with fixed bayonets, the men of the 155th, led by Colonel Allen, rush forward in a storm of bullets. On, still on, until they approach within 20 yards of the stone wall, which runs along the base of Mary's Heights, and which, in one sheet of flame and sulphurous smoke from the musketry of the enemy, the ranks are thinned, and the field is covered with the dead and wounded. The line falters, then turns back, unable to withstand the withering fire. Humphreys' division has lost 1,760 men out of 4,000 in the 10 minutes it has been under fire. Hark now to the din of the conflict. All the guns from the heights open. The earth trembles and quakes amid the awful thunders of the cannonade, and the shells shriek through the air like wrath's flaming archangels. The 155th is losing heavily. Its best and bravest have already gone down in the blinding smoke of battle. See, the gallant Captain Anschutz falls. See, the heroic Sergeant Wiseman, the color-bearer, is pierced by 3 balls, but still holds the colors in his nerveless grasp. See, the heroic corporals Charles Bardeen of Company F and George W. Bratton of Company E. Each in turn lifts the flag on high, but soon bites the dust. Still, Color Corporals Frank Thompson, Company I, and John Rankin raise it again, giving up their lives. And finally, the brave Corporal Lawson unfurls it in the face of the enemy. Look! The shaft is shattered in twain, and the regiment banner falls. But for a moment, still it is raised aloft again and waves on the battle line. The regiment falls back, leaving its dead upon the field, but the colors all riddled and torn are borne to the rear, never soiled by the touch of traitor hands. All hail to our regimental banner, first unfurled in its pristine brightness at Fredericksburg, but carried hence from the storm, blackened with smoke, torn by shot, rent by shell, riddled by bullets, and stained and crimsoned with the blood of the heroes who rallied around it, with flagstaff shattered in twain, and with 15 bullet holes through its silken folds, but still waving from the battle line in resplendent beauty, all the more sacred for its scars, and all the more glorious for its baptism of fire and blood. Thrice hail to the flag of the 155th, which from the hour when it was first born into the storm of battle and woeful disaster, down to the day of the final triumph, never once trailed in the dust, never was wrested from its standard-bearers by rebel hands, but was returned, at the close of the war, to the loyal old Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who gave it into our keeping, all storm-bleached and battle-torn, but emblazoned with the names of 28 battles, inscribed in golden letters upon its gorgeous stripes, and without one blot on its state arms, or one star removed from the glittering galaxy of its azure field. But forward is the command, and under Fighting Joe Hooker we again crossed the Rappahannock, and on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of May, 1863, fight the terrific Battle of Chancellorsville in a consuming forest. Here the commander, but not the Army of the Potomac, is beaten, and we return, for the second time, to the north side of the river, dispirited and disheartened, but still undismayed. But Lee assumes the offensive and invades the soil of our native state. Turning our faces northward, we march day and night until we confront his army at Gettysburg. Here the 155th has the post of honor and wins additional laurels. Seeing the importance of holding Little Round Top, General Warren at once ordered the 5th Corps to occupy it. The 155th, under the command of Colonel Kane, forms its line on the very crest of this eminence. The men of the regiment dragged the guns of Hazlitt's regular battery by hand to the summit. Here and now, it was that the Confederate powers had set their fortunes on a single cast, resolved to stand the hazard of the die. Hood hurls his gray columns again and again against our line. Charge after charge is made. Our brigade commander, the gallant Weed, is stricken down, and the brave Hazlitt, while bending over his lifeless form, likewise was stricken in death. Colonel O'Rourke assumes command, but falls mortally wounded. The crisis is critical, but the old guard stands firm, and hurls the Texan Rangers back, like ocean spray from the rock-bound shore. Meade crowns himself in Pennsylvania with never-fading glory. The battle is won. The army is saved. The tide of the war is turned. The sun of the Confederacy goes down with the close of this day, and the American Republic, upheld upon the bayonets of the Army of the Potomac, is secure against the assaults of treason. The invader leaves our soil, and we follow him into Virginia, where he takes up his line of defense behind the Rapidan. Under Meade, the regiment now participates in the actions of Rappahannock Station, Bristow Station, and Mine Run. But forward is the command, and under Grant, the hero of the West, we begin that long series of battles from day to day, from week to week, marching all night and fighting all day, from the Wilderness on the 5th of May to Cold Harbor on the 1st of June, 1864. During which time 60,000 men are left on the plains of Virginia, and when the resolution is formed, quote, to fight it out on this line if it takes all summer, unquote, still fighting, and still moving to the left until Wilderness, Laurel Hill, Spotsylvania, North Anna, Totopotomoy, Bethesda Church, and Cold Harbor. In quick succession, glitter in golden letters on the silken folds of our war-riddled banner. During this time, the 155th, under the command of Colonel A. L. Pearson, was clothed in the Zouave uniform and attached to General Ayres' Brigade of Regulars, 2nd Division, 5th Corps. But forward again, now under the lead of the gallant Griffin of the 1st Division, of which command we now formed a component part. We cross to the south side of the James and march on to Petersburg. Here the works are stormed on the 18th of June, the darkest day in the calendar of the regiment, when so many of our bravest and best, including Captain McKee of Company I, go down in the terrible conflict. In this charge the regiment lost 83 killed and wounded in the short space of 10 minutes. In the summer and winter of 1864, the 155th participated in all the battles in front and to the left of Petersburg, including Mine Explosion, Weldon Railroad, Reams Station, Peebles Farm, Hatcher's Run, and Dabney's Mills. At the Battle of Peebles Farm on the 30th of September, the regiment displayed more than its wonted valor. Colonel Pearson led his men in a gallant charge, driving the rebels from 2 strong lines of earthworks and planting the regimental colors on the parapet of a well-constructed redan. For gallant conduct in this battle, Colonel Pearson was brevetted Brigadier General. At 3:30 in the morning of the 29th of March, 1865, we begin our last campaign. The bugles sound forward. Forward again to the left, ever towards the sunset. Making a long detour around the enemy's right flank, we strike his skirmishers at Gravelly Run, and after some hard fighting, Warren presses on to the Quaker Road, near its junction with the White Oak Road. Here, a desperate battle is fought. Ayres' division, enveloped in the woods and overpowered by superior numbers, gave way, falling back on Crawford. His division, disorganized by the fugitives, broke in turn. Then it was that Griffin stood, like a stone wall, and making a countercharge, drove the enemy before him, capturing many prisoners. General Pearson, taking the colors of his old regiment, commanded the men to follow, and the flag of the 155th was seen in the van, and was soon planted inside the rebel lines. The Battle of the Quaker Road is one of the brightest which shine in the 28 engagements emblazoned on our regimental banner. General Pearson, for gallant conduct in this action, was brevetted Major General. General Warren, following up his success, now moved forward to turn the rebel right, and at 5 Forks, with the 5th Corps, on the 1st of April, fought one of the most brilliant battles of the war, winning a splendid victory. The trophies of the day included 5,000 prisoners, 18 guns, and many battle flags. The enemy's right is now turned. On, still on, the 5th Corps presses on Lee's right and rear. Now there is a forward movement along the whole line, from the Appomattox to Hatcher's Run. On the morning of the 2nd of April, 100 cannon belch forth their fire and reverberate along the line, and the musketry of the contending armies rattles along the entrenchments, from beyond Richmond to the South Side Railroad. The line advances. The defenses of the enemy are carried. Petersburg is ours. But the Army of the Potomac is already far southward in pursuit of the flying columns of Lee, Longstreet, and Ewell. The 155th, with the 5th Corps, strikes the enemy's rear guard at Sailor's Creek, and after a spirited engagement, drives it over the bridge, capturing the wagon trains and many prisoners. The 2nd, 5th, 6th, and 24th Corps, and Sheridan's cavalry, moving by different roads on the right and left of the retreating column, unite at Appomattox Courthouse, and soon encircle Lee's whole army, with a wall of bayonets and an impregnable line of living blue. On the 9th of April, the 155th is on the skirmish line. It fires the last shot of the Army of the Potomac. That shot is historic forevermore. It was the parting salute of war, to the coming of the goddess of domestic concord and fraternal union. As the missile speeds on its way of ruin and affright, a white smoke follows after it, parts from its uppermost curve and melts into the higher air of heaven, and spreads its wings like the angel of peace, the harbinger of the better day. Company I has the distinguished honor of contributing the last man killed in the last engagement of that historic army, Private William Montgomery, who fell at the most advanced post of our line on the last day of the war, 1 hour before the surrender. His blood was the last shed in the glorious cause, and his grave in the National Cemetery at Poplar Grove, near Petersburg, was the last that closed upon the Northern heroism and valor. Soon, a white flag is displayed on the skirmish line in front of our regiment, and is escorted in by Sergeant Major William Shore. General Lee, for the first time, passes within our lines. The rebel chieftain, who had so long and so successfully organized a front of opposition against our advancing armies, yields his sword to the great captain of the century, beneath the apple blossoms of Appomattox, and surrenders the Army of Northern Virginia, whose heroic struggles were worthy of a better cause. The 5th Corps was left to manage the details of the capitulation, while the rest of the Army of the Potomac turned their faces northward, and moved from the theater of bloody strife. The 155th, now under command of Major John A. Klein, soon followed, making a triumphal entree into Petersburg and Richmond, and joining in the grand review of the combined forces of the Republic through the streets of Washington. With the surrender of Lee, the struggle between the warring sections was over. The storm cloud rolled away from our national horizon, and, quote, the war drum throbbed no longer, and the battle flags were furled, unquote. With what pride did we, my comrades, join in the triumphal march through the streets of the national capital. With what beating hearts and swelling patriotism did we tread again the soil of our native state. With what a thrill of joy did we behold the ascending smoke from the factories of our native city, and see again our homes rising in the distance. With what proud step did we march down our familiar streets, bearing aloft our torn and tattered banners, amid the shouts and huzzas of victory. The 2nd of June, 1865, is a marked day in the calendar of the 155th Regiment, an era in each of our lives. It chronicles the disbandment of our organization, the laying aside of the uniform of the soldier, to wear again the simple garb of the citizen. Those who came back from the war were no longer young and smiling. All the boys were now bearded and bronzed men, with the earnest stamp of manhood on their brows. Some of them were hobbling on crutches. Some were swinging empty sleeves, others tottering from disease incurred in the service. They went out blooming, youthful, fair. They came back wearing the somber visage of warriors tried and true. But some of the best and the bravest returned not with the victorious battalions. Ah, my comrades! But a few survivors of the gallant regiment, which numbered 850 men when we left for the seat of war, were among those who were found in the ranks when we reached home 3 years later. And now, 26 years later, many who returned with us have listened to the mystic bugle call, summoning them to the, quote, ranks of their brothers gone before, unquote. And at this reunion we look in vain for those sublime heroes and martyrs who went down in the great fight for liberty and country, and for those who have silently passed away to the camps of the great army of the dead. You may call the roll today, but they will not answer to their names. They are not here. They are lying in their graves. The hand that grasped the sword is powerless. The eye that flashed with patriotic fire is closed in death. The tongue that gave the command forward is silent. Where is the tall and martial form of Captain Samuel McKee, the ideal soldier, who never blanched in battle, nor faltered in the discharge of duty? Alas! He went down before the storm of leaden hail, in the charge of Petersburg. But his dust is now gathered and inurned in our own beautiful cemetery, where, with each return of spring, willing hands strew his grave with choicest flowers. Where are the gallant Captain Anschutz, the noble Captain Clapp, the unfortunate Captain Sackett, the duty-loving Lieutenant Strong, the brave Lieutenants Johnston and Dunn? Where are the stalwart heroes Sergeant Weissman, the standard-bearer of Fredericksburg, and the 4 brave color corporals, Charles Bardeen of Company F, and George W. Bratton of Company E, Frank Thompson, Company I, and young Rankin, color guards who fell in battle, who together went from the battlefield to the shining camps above like plumed warriors, for whom the everlasting tents were opened as they were stricken into victory? Where are those heroic color corporals, John Mackin of Company F, and Thomas McCush of Company I, who on other fields died in defense of the flag? Where are the manly Sergeant Isaac Wyckoff and the intrepid William Welton, who both fell victims of the sharpshooter's range on Little Round Top? Where are the patriotic Sergeant Frank Martin and the youthful Theodore Baldwin of Company F, the brave Sergeant Alexander Carson of Company D, and Sergeant Frederick Scheckler of Company K, who all yielded up lives of promise in manhood's early prime, willing sacrifices for their country's need? Where are Irwin and Meeker of Company H, and Wentling of Company G, who died far away from friends and kindred, literally starved to death in the prison pens of Andersonville? Where are Sergeant Henry R. Campbell of Company B and John Hunter of Company E, who on reaching Annapolis, Maryland, after the release from the same prison, died from the terrible effects of the torture endured? Where is young Corporal Phillips of Company I, with his radiant smile and Christian faith, the blameless and beautiful character whose saintly spirit exhaled so sweet a fragrance that the perfume lingers with us yet? Where is Private Montgomery of the same company, who fell on the very day of the final triumph, giving his life as a peace offering and his blood as a sacrament of reconciliation between the warring sections of a divided land. Where are all those noble and stalwart men, and boys in their teens, who gladdened our long and dreary winter nights in camp with their mirth and song? Where are all those who, footsore and hungry, joined us on the march, and laid down with us on the same green sward, or side by side on the same frozen ground, with the starry canopy for a covering? Where are those who stood with us in the same line of battle on 28 ensanguined fields, when the leaden hail mowed down our ranks, and listened with us to the awful thunder of the same guns, and quaked together, when the lightnings of heaven danced along our lines from bayonet to bayonet? Where are all those immortal heroes and canonized martyrs who went down in the blinding smoke of battle and, quote, looked proudly to heaven from the deathbed of fame, unquote? Some of them are gathered in our own beautiful cemeteries, and rest calmly in the graves which we decorate each year with the first flowers of spring. Some repose in the national cemeteries of Antietam and Gettysburg and Poplar Grove Cemetery near Petersburg. But most of them lie in their shrouds of blue, on the very fields dyed and crimsoned with their blood. Down by the blue Potomac, their dust is commingling with the sacred soil. They are sleeping in the unknown graves along the shores of the fern-marged Rappahannock, and the James and Rapidan chant their funeral requiem. They lie uncoffined on the evergreen mountains of Maryland and Virginia, on Mary's Heights, on the charred plains of Chancellorsville, in the thickets of the Wilderness, in the swamps of the Chickahominy, in the ditches of Petersburg and Richmond, and on the fields where fame wrote their names in blood and winter froze them into immortality. The 155th Regiment came out of the war with 28 battles inscribed upon its flag, and without one blot upon its azure field or one stain upon its stripes. It went into the war with 850 men, which number was increased by subsequent enlistments to 1,523, and came out of the war with less than 780. Many of these maimed and crippled. 519 of our comrades were killed and wounded. 112 died of disease. 21 were taken prisoners, 10 of whom were starved to death in rebel prison pens. It went into the service when war was no longer an experiment, but reduced to a science, and when the rank and file were inured to hardship and accustomed to battle. From the first it fought alongside of veterans without disparagement to its fame. It enlisted for the war, and was mustered out of the service because the war was ended. We wear its badge as the most honorable insignia that can be placed upon our breasts. We prize it more than coronet or garter, or the ribbons of the far-famed Legion of Honor. We feel that while we live, the proudest title to which we can lay claim, and dying, the richest legacy we can leave to our children and kindred is that we were members of the 155th Regiment, Pennsylvania Veteran Volunteers. In that colossal painting of Kaulbach, which represents the legendary fight of Attila the Hun, there are 2 fields and 2 contests. The one between the soldiers striving in a deadly combat on the turf, the other a shadowy battle, set in the upper air between the ghosts of the heroes slain below. So, methinks, there are 2 battalions of our regiment, both participating in our reunion today. The one, the survivors here assembled, who at the close of the war took their way homeward, and prepared their own unselfish disarmament, and returned to the peaceful interests of the country they helped to save. The other, the battalion of the canonized dead, who once filled our now thinned ranks, the invisible portion of our regiment, who have left the shining halls of their Valhalla to mingle with us, and whose spirits hover above us in shadowy forms, making this the reunion of the living and the dead, the victors and the martyrs, united in holy memories as they were united in battle. And now we drop a tear to the memory of our brave comrades, who yielded up their lives that the nation might live, and to the immortal Trinity, Weed, Hazlitt, and O'Rourke, whose blood hallows the ground upon which we stand, but no garland of affection scattered upon their graves, nor love nor tears can reanimate their sleeping dust, nor can studied eulogy add aught to the splendor of their deathless fame. But we know that every deed of peerless valor, every act of patriotic devotion, every example of exalted self-sacrifice, even unto death and martyrdom, offered in the nation's defense, is lifted above all vulgar destiny, and will live as long as the Republic honors her heroes. We surrender this monument into the keeping of the loyal Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in the hope that built of imperishable granite it may endure forever. But should it too crumble beneath the obliterating touch of time, and the record carved upon its tablets be effaced, and every letter in the inscriptions be lost, this historic mountain will still stand as an everlasting monument to perpetuate for all time the name and fame of the 155th Regiment Pennsylvania Veteran Volunteers. This episode, this speech, broke me. It gave me goosebumps, it gave me chills, it made me think of my own departed friends that I miss from my own campaigns. Stay safe, have a good one, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
They will find him and know him amongst the good and true, when a robe of white is given for that faded coat of blue. No more the bugle calls the weary one. Rest, noble spirit, in thy grave alone. They will find you and know you amongst the good and true, when a robe of white is given for that faded coat of blue. He cried, give me water and just one little crumb, and my mother, she will bless you through all the years to come. Go tell my sweet sister, so gentle, good and true, that I'll meet her up in heaven in my faded coat of blue. No more the bugle calls the weary one. Rest, noble spirit, in thy grave alone. They will find you and know you amongst the good and true. When a robe of white is given for that faded